Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our final parent question and answer session for the reopening of schools at the Horsehead Central School District for 2020-2021. This evening's event is for pre-K through 6th grade. And because we've been having more and more experience with these streaming situations, we are coming to you via Zoom, but we're live streaming through an outside source and through BOCES, which is not Zoom. So for some technical information, if you are having buffering or technical issues at home, most likely it's in bandwidth or other things going on. So I'll turn you over real quick to Mr. Bill Giancoli, our Director of Technology.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. We are viewing this as a live stream. This is going through GST BOCES. They set up a server for us so that we could push out this stream to the community. If you're watching on our website, you will see a screen, and under that screen, you'll see 3 different servers you can choose from. If you are experiencing buffering or that some choppiness, you can choose a different server and refresh your browser. That should help out the issue. Also, if you're streaming other things at home, you have Netflix going or some other kind of streaming service, sometimes that can take up some bandwidth in the home as well. So otherwise, you should be okay. And we are also recording this, and we'll be posting it later on once it is fully processed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giancoli. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's session, we have well over 100 and something questions. We will try to attempt to hit all of them in either a direct question or a response and a conversational format. Please understand that this will be recorded so that you have that to refer back to, as well as there's many items coming out from the district as well. So in order to start tonight off, we wanted to tell you how we got here a little bit. And obviously, with our mission and vision, we are looking to explore, empower, and excel, even in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. We had certainly an experience between March and June, which we were trying to ensure that as we go throughout our presentation, we bring you a situation that helps to explain why the decisions were made that they were. Our plan development priorities have always been about safe physical environment for our students and our staff, as well as the community. In addition, we are looking at how do we support the social emotional well-being of our students and staff, as well as all within the community during this difficult time, and also making sure that we are developmentally appropriate and differentiated in instruction for our approach with the varying different levels and moving educational forward. So as we go on, how did we get to this point? The district would have loved to have been starting to work on this in June 1st when we were originally promised by our governor. Unfortunately, the governor and the State Department of Health did not give us any guidance on how to reopen until roughly July 13th and July 15th. And we were required to submit the plan of how we were going to operate under the governor's continuum of learning, which that continuum consists of 100% in person every day. Also, it could consist of 100% remote every day, and it could also consist of some format in between the two. The big thing about the situation is that we had to meet the Department of Health standards and the state education standards throughout the process, and our constituencies made up of all types of stakeholders, whether it's students, staff, we had community members, parents, community organizations helping us develop the best possible outcome for us to move forward. And because we have to meet social distancing requirements, size of facilities, staffing, transportation limitations with social distancing, feeding students, it made it virtually impossible for the district to be able to open in 100% in-person model. The reason why we couldn't do that is because it was either physical capacity of space. We do not have enough buses. We do not have enough bus drivers. Even if we had the space, we would have to double our teaching staff to be able to take the class sizes and cut them in half for social distancing, but you can't really do that to a human person. So we would need double our teaching. That would be financially unable for almost any district of a large nature to meet. There are districts out there that are of a smaller nature that only have 13 students per class or 26 students per class where they could do it. And that's where you'll see 100% in person every day, if anything. But for the vast majority of the districts, you'll see the hybrid and the remote approach for 100%, with some districts only offering just the hybrid. We have tried to do what we can for the safety and security of our families, as well as our instructional staff, as we have to be here each day. So we ended up taking that model and putting it into place. So what you will hear tonight is information about that model, some of the requirements, some of the issues in regards to health and safety. You will hear our instructional programming, as well as how that is going to sort of look, and it will develop over time with the teachers and the parents working collaboratively together, whether you're in hybrid or 100% remote as well. And ultimately, we are in this situation until the governor says we are either to work 100% remote or 100% in person. So this is where we are right now. Please understand the district, its administrative team, and its teachers are working hard to provide and excel with the best education possible. So at this time, we're in the implementation part of the plan. And to start off with some of the questions, I would like to turn it over with Mr. Gill as he goes along with the initial implementation phase.
Thank you. As Tom was saying, we had a fast turnaround in creation of a plan with many stakeholder groups to put forward our plan to Department of Education and Department of Health. One key piece of that required quick feedback to move forward was understanding the parent selection of the model and the assignment of the model that they chose, whether it be the hybrid or the 100%. Over the last week, our principals have been working to assign and meet the request of the hybrid model. Some things to keep in mind about that, those notifications for the hybrid days just went out. In a normal course, a normal class, in a normal year, I should say, we have our principals and teachers working together to create class lists, looking at heterogeneous groupings, working to set students up for that following school year. This school year, we wanted to maintain those same models of grouping, but also understood that we had capacity and hybrids and versus remote to work around as well. So the capacity of our classrooms are in consideration in breaking those into pieces required based on the parent request of the hybrid model. Why I tell you all this is it does make it very difficult to do any movement once we've established the parent's request. To start off with a student that chose 100% remote, our class lists were formed and we might have capacity in our classrooms maxed on a particular A day or B day cohort, and to insert another student who's decided there's a change, they decided to go from that 100% remote to a hybrid, it's not easy. Those classes already been set to establish them with the proper capacity and the Department of Health guidelines. So please understand that if you've received a notification of a hybrid day and you had chosen 100% remote, that is the main error that we'll be looking to make sure that we clarify. Also, all attempts to add to all that other layers of creating class lists to ensure that our students in that same households were all together was another layer of difficulty. So if that did not happen and you do have students that are in the wrong cohort from your household, another reason, please reach out to your principal for that clarification. And as we've gone through, now that we have that information in hand, we can continue our implementation model. It's so important to recognize that between the August 1st, the day after the submission of our model, through September 8th, right before school starts, that we are in this constant movement of decision-making and seeking input from stakeholders to make in education and our teachers and administrators to make decisions on the implementation of that plan. So whether it becomes obviously the notification of the assigned model that just went out, and now the transportation department will talk about the bus routing, making sure our facilities are prepared and those proper procedures, and working with the health department, the master schedules, and making sure that those are all set. The cafeteria usage, as Jessica will talk about, and those instructional expectations and the uses of our learning management system and what the instruction looks like, especially in some of those special area classrooms. So I'll transition now over to Caitlin, who's going to talk about start our health and safety conversation, and I'll leave it with this last bullet for her to discuss what that means if we are to go 100% remote.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, so we know from the governor, he has set the metrics of looking at our regional infection rate. We know that if our regional infection rate is less than 5% in any 14-day rolling average, then we can reopen schools with students in the buildings. And that's where we are now, is that our regional infection rate, we're fortunate enough, is that it's under 1% currently. So we are permitted by the state standard to have children in the school. If the regional infection rate rises above 9%, we know that we must transition to remote instruction immediately, and that will happen. And Governor Cuomo has also indicated as recently as yesterday that in addition to the 9% rule that he talked about when this was unveiled back in July, that he's also going to be taking a look at special areas, but districts, making sure that on a local level, if there are any spikes, even if that doesn't impact the 9% regional infection rate, that there could be a possibility that if there is a spike in any given area or any district, that the district could go to fully remote at that time too. We did do quite a bit of work to get our health and safety plan ready. We know that we will be able to meet all the requirements of the Department of Health guidance and state ed guidance when it comes to health and safety elements that we need to meet. It is important that parents are a part of this too. So this is very much a partnership. Staff, students, parents, we all need to be on board to make sure that we can meet all the health and safety elements, to make sure that we've got a community and a school that's as safe as possibly can for everybody. That where that starts is right from the beginning of the day. So talking about what it will look like for kids when they come into school. We will have mandatory health screenings at the door. Every day when students approach school, they will have their temperature taken. If their student's temperature is above 100 degrees, then the student will be sent to the nurse's office, and there will be an immediate call home that a parent or guardian will need to come and pick up their student. So parents, it's very important that you might want to get into the habit of checking your student's temperature before they get on the bus or before you drop them off to school each day, and monitor for any other symptoms so there aren't any surprises once they do get to school. We will also have a periodic screening for students, and that will look like the kind of screenings that you might have seen if you go to get your hair cut at a salon, or if you're going to any healthcare facility. And the screening will ask the questions that we've become used to if you've been in close or proximate contact with anyone who has had COVID-19 in the past 14 days, and if you have traveled internationally or from a state with a widespread community transmission rather. So we will be sending out that questionnaire on a weekly basis to all families. It will come in the form of an email, and parents will have to certify yes or no to each of those questions. The results will go to the building principals, who will be able to review them and screen for any yes answers, and then also take a look and make sure there is compliance, that everybody is filling out the screening questionnaire, as we really must make sure everybody does. Masks are a big part of our health and safety protocol for the district. So if you take a look at our website, there's a lot of good information there. There are links to the full plan. There are links to frequently asked questions, and there are special links to spots that are important and high interest level that the governor said we have to have special flags for. So masks is one of those things. And in Horseheads, it's recommended that students wear their masks at all times, and masks are required anytime that students and staff cannot maintain a 6-foot social distance setting. So we know we're going to have kids that will wear masks anytime they're on student transportation, on the buses, anytime you're walking through the hallway, kids will need to be masked. any transitions, perhaps you have to go from class to class or go visit an office or on your way to the lunchroom. Everyone will need to have masks on during bathroom trips. And also anytime you are in the classroom and you cannot maintain that social distance. So the classrooms will be socially distanced classrooms. There will be fewer desks in the room, and there will also be a space for students, for the teacher that's socially distanced from the students. But anytime the instruction changes and maybe the teacher has to go and approach a student to check on their work, or students have to go into a group setting, or they have to move around the room for something, then teachers will give cues to the kids. Okay, kids, time to mask up, or time to put on your mask. And at that point, we do need to make sure that kids are following all the reasonable directions of the teacher in order to keep everybody safe and keep us in compliance with our health and safety plan. We did get some questions about what is a mask. A mask, quite simply, needs to be a facial covering that covers both the nose and mouth. It can be cloth or it can be disposable. Face shields do not count as a mask. Students are welcome to wear the face shields in addition to a facial covering, and they can also keep a face shield on anytime they are socially distanced. If that brings a greater comfort level to them, that's fine. Students may see some teachers wearing face shields when teachers are socially distanced, so it's something that's going to be pretty commonplace in our school buildings. Students, of course, can remove their masks at lunchtime, and not to worry if any masks get broken or lost throughout the course of the day. We have ample supply to give students a new mask if they do lose it or if it gets damaged. If a student, and they'll be at different places throughout the school buildings and also on school buses. So if a student does come on the bus and they don't have a mask, it'll be okay. We will have masks there available for them. It's crucial, like I mentioned, that we do have partnership with parents and students, that everybody follows these rules. We need to make sure they really are intended to keep everybody in Horsehead safe, and that's what we need to do. Also on the district website, if anyone has taken a look at it, we do have a superintendent's directive there. Dr. Douglas has issued a directive to give us an enforcement mechanism to make sure that everyone who's in our schools, whether it be a student, a staff member, or a visitor, is following our protocols. So anytime there is a problem with that and someone either doesn't follow the face mask protocol, or failure to socially distance or permit temperature checks, that will be seen for students as a code of conduct violation, and it will be dealt with by the teaching staff and administrative support as a disciplinary situation. We also had some questions about what does our testing plan look like, and how do we know when school is closed, or what will trigger a closure if there is a case of COVID-19 in the school. So to start with, there is no mandatory intake testing. Teachers will not be mandated to receive a COVID-19 negative test before they come to school. Same thing for students. We do not have a COVID-19 testing facility in the Horsehead Central School District, so that is not a requirement that we have, and that's why it's crucial that we are monitoring for symptoms before people come to school each day, and that we're following all the extra protocols to make sure everyone is as safe as possible. If there is a time when any student or staff member comes down with symptoms of COVID-19, they will be sent home for the day. Again, parents, similar to the screenings at the beginning of the day, parents would be called immediately to come and get their kid from the nurse's office. What we do to make sure that the student or the staff member who has symptoms comes back into school safely, what our protocol looks like is, first of all, documentation from a healthcare provider that the person is clear to return to school. Second of all, a negative COVID test, and also symptom resolution. And we're asking that people stay home at least 72 hours until their symptoms have fully resolved. If there is a COVID-19 positive result from a test, then we turn to the Chemung County Department of Health, and we do need to have the student or the staff member cleared and released from isolation as required by the Department of Health. We will be working with the Department of Health for contract tracing, and we will be, so anytime there is a case of COVID-19 in the school, I can't tell you at this moment what the automatic rule is about how far that quarantine would extend in the school, because the public health experts at the Department of Health really tell us that it depends on a case-by-case basis. It depends how many people the positive case was exposed to. It depends on whether people were in the vicinity of the person who became ill, what were following the rules, were they all wearing their masks, were they socially distanced? So it's really going to be determined on a case-by-case basis, and we will work with the Chemung County Department of Health to help them with that contract tracing, to look at attendance records, to look at who is in the room, to look at whether or not the health and safety rules were being followed at the time. I think it's also a good time now as we get towards the end of the summer to remind everybody that there is a New York State Travel Advisory in place. The list of states with high community spread that New York State residents are asked to refrain from voluntary travel to is updated every Tuesday, so make sure you are looking that. If you are planning a family vacation here in the next couple weeks, take an extra close look at that list, because we will not be able to permit any student to come into our schools who has traveled to one of those states and has not completed the 14-day isolation period.
Yes, Mr. Filippo, if I can add in there, plus I have a couple questions that I want you to touch base with. Parents, please understand we need your cooperation in this, because one of the things that happens is we are a mandated reporter also to the Department of Health. If we learn either through your child or somebody else, or somebody just says something online that an individual has traveled, we are required to notify the Department of Health. That could potentially have some financial implications if somebody knowingly came into the schools. So please, we are trying to make sure nobody gets caught in the middle here. We ask that you assist us and make sure that if you are attending any of these, talk to your building principals so that we know that you'll properly quarantine and that we can try to make sure you get to the remote situation. Please understand that we just don't want to put anybody in a specific position, but we must. Caitlin, in regards to sort of the 72 hours, if a kid has a fever at home, 100 degrees, and that's all they had, and they had it one day and it broke the next day, it is always advisable to go to see a doctor just to help out. But sometimes kids have allergies, they have asthma, they know that. We want them to resolve their symptoms. What are some suggestions there? And if somebody had that 100 degrees in school, what's going to happen?
If someone does register a temperature of 100 degrees or more in school, they will be put in the nurse's office, and the nurse will have to make a call home. We don't have a lot of wiggle room on that at all. It will be an immediate call home that the student does need to be picked up. As far as other symptoms, as far as allergies, we know kids get sick for a lot of reasons that aren't necessarily related to a global pandemic. Remember, of course, if your kids are ill for any reason, we've got another option now. There is remote learning. If your student is ill, make sure that you're taking a look at that. And perhaps it might be wise to make sure that the kid logs into school remotely that day if they are feeling ill or have other symptoms, rather than coming into school and causing other questions and a potential for having to come in midday and have your child sent home.
And I think that's important to note, that if a child truly is sick and you know they're sick, just like a staff member, we don't want them coming in, and we don't want them worrying about school just as if it was the normal school year. But if you're in the recovery phase, you're waiting the 72 hours, that's what that remote piece is for. That's why we have kids coming in person and the remote, and you have access to both. So please take advantage of it, as education will be happening on a daily basis and the students and families will have to keep up. Thank you. Because I have to look back and forth to keep track of it, that's why I put my blackout screen on and I'm always looking off to the side. We just want to make sure we cover everything. Our next area is with health and safety, and we're going to invite Mr. Michael Coughlin, our Director of Facilities, to assist at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. First of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about the cleaning protocols and the products. For the COVID, we are governed. We have SCD protocol, we have the Department of Health and CDC to follow, and we will be following those procedures and protocols. We've been reviewing them the last couple of weeks as a little more guidance has come out. And I'd like to talk a little bit about cleaning the rooms and areas that we'll be touching, but the areas I'll talk to, but not limited to, but all hard surfaces, doorknobs, doors, light switches, desks, teachers, students, countertops, office, cafeteria, kitchen, break room. A lot of electronic technology we'll be using, phone headsets, and a whole list of things that have been on there will be disinfected daily through many different means and ways that we'll be doing that. You know, we have secured, there's new technology on some of the cleaning materials and even some of the equipment we use. The district has secured some foggers as well as some misters, and we'll be using them where appropriate, when we should be using them for efficiency under the strict guidelines of the manufacturer and the product that we'll be using in them at that time. We've also gone a little further. We've been talking on it that all hard surfaces are going to have a ceramic coating put on them, that we're very fortunate with technology and reviewing that will really help us with an insurance policy, keeping the pH real high on these, not getting too technical. But this is a great, with technology out there and some of the data we've seen, we feel this is above and beyond insurance that'll be going on all hard surfaces, all the areas that we'll be cleaning. We'll be doing them once a day. We are also looking to increase staffing in the buildings. We'll be working with it, people going on as the buildings are occupied, continuing with disinfecting, not so much fogging and misting during the day where the students are there, but we'll be following behind depending on the duties and room areas are there. We'll be continuing following all procedures and protocol that have been recommended to the district to reopen. We'll cover a little bit on playgrounds and stuff a little bit later in some of the other areas, but that protocol and the cleaning procedures will be district-wide, and we'll be talking a little bit later about buses as well. One other one on there, and I know Caitlin talked on that a little bit, is we will be providing, if no one would go without, we talked on masks and other PPE equipment that's out there. But one of my recommendations would be, well, mainly for my grandchild and seeing they're out there, so we find a lot of the kids are a little more favorable and comfortable with their own. If they don't, we have masks. We've just secured thousands and thousands of adults a mask and student masks, which we're required to do. But we would strongly encourage and looking at it be your mask and even your hand sanitizers, which in all the rooms will be the proper PPE sanitizers that they would need. But I like to bring that up. I feel you might be a little more comfortable with some of the products that you're already used to at home, and your child could be able to apply and have them readily available at all times. We talked a little bit about the classrooms early on social distancing. We came up with direction we're going. We are currently working in all the classrooms throughout the district, in cafeterias, office space, and some other extra areas. They will all be set up with social distancing in mind. For instance, a traditional classroom would be set up for 24 students. Now it'll traditionally be set up for 12 students, and these numbers will vary on the class size with all social distancing in mind. This was very important as we went through. We felt without the social distancing, masks were going to be required all the time. This will allow for breaks during the educational process. There'll be other times throughout the day that'll be there, but all teaching spaces, when we can make it work, have been set up with social distancing in mind. And I don't want to think when we can't make it work, we just need to find alternative spaces or other accommodations to make that work. So we've been working real hard on that the last couple of weeks, and we'll continue to do that as students get ready to come back and staff. One area that's been brought up, and I've seen on some of the questions, playgrounds will be disinfected daily. We purchased some equipment for that, and we will be following that ceramic coating we talked about will be applied to all the hard surfaces outside. And so that'll be something we'll be maintaining. As far as recess areas, social distancing is working with some of the building administrators now when they're out there coming up with activities. And how can we clearly mark the areas so that we can actually help teach the kids so they know what social distancing means. This will be an area we'll work on the exterior. So it would be maybe even sometimes some of the exterior classrooms can get out there. Air filtration standards, you know, this was a big requirement, one of them coming from the state before we could open back up. We're continuing to monitoring that. The district has secured MERV 13 filters for every mechanical device in the district that requires them. This was one of the standards set up, and as they come in, we will be adjusting all of our HVAC systems when the filters come in to increase the airflow. I don't think a lot of people really understood. You probably hear from the kids all the time, the heating, but we have always been required to turn over the air in the classrooms depending on when they're occupied or not occupied and the number of occupants in this space. We have a goal to bring as much outside air in and turn the room over as quick as we can with these filters, and our mechanical devices will allow. And definitely till the cooler air comes, our goal would be 100% outside air pumping into these rooms and turning them over. Along with that, we've really looked at all of our mechanical systems throughout the district. They'll be brought online much earlier in the morning so we can make up air in these spaces, have a turnover 2 to 3 times before anyone's in the building, and help air out after any disinfecting we've done. We will be looking at setting this filtration systems, and any of the HVAC will be running longer hours into the night. This wasn't always required, but as we are going through disinfecting and having other activities in the building, we feel it's real important to just keep that air moving. And along with that, I've seen some of the questions, and I know in talking today, the middle school, Center Street has a second floor, and the high school has some second floors. We'll be monitoring the temperatures in there. We're hoping with this increased airflow, these activities that we'll be doing earlier in the day, some other mechanical devices and some additional fans to minimize the temperature in the rooms to make it more of an educational setting. So all these are things that we'll be working on and to get ready for the students to come back, and we will follow all these guidelines once we get opened up again. Any questions?
Mike, one of the questions that's remaining is, can students bring their own antibacterial items from home, such as hand wipes, hand sanitizers, Clorox wipes, and bathrooms? Will they be cleaned in between student use and so forth, or just generally cleaned?
A couple questions on that. I know some guidance will be coming from the district shortly, on bringing their stuff. I am not opposed. We would always want to know when they're bringing anything with a chemical in it, just so we're not doing cross-contamination. We take this extremely serious. Didn't mention it, but we've actually hired some consultants with all this new technology going on for some training with our staff, as well as to review with our own health and safety services in BOCES. So if they're bringing something in, I would hope to get it approved. As far as the hand sanitizers, please keep in mind this is something that an adult should be monitoring if you're having your child come with that. It is allowed now. Prior to COVID-19, that wasn't something that should be in the room. We strongly encourage anytime you can just wash your hands, it should be used as in lieu of if you're unable to use regular hygiene. But with that being allowed coming in, Tom, or Dr. Douglas, excuse me, we are allowing it this time, and I believe a list will be coming out. We'll be talking about wipes, masks, The same could be, I had some questions recently asked on sneeze shields for student desks. This is not something we're looking to provide since we're setting the rooms already up in the 6-foot distancing from everyone, and it's not required. But if someone felt they wanted to bring it in, I'd strongly encourage that if they do bring it in, that they take it home with them. Be careful. We have found on some of these sneeze guards, some of the chemicals give a white haze. It would be real important if you're going to have something like that, you take it home and you maintain it, keep it disinfected, and bring that back with you. We're going to talk a little later on some other areas, but they'd want to take that with them and come back.
Yes, that's a good point, Mike. We are trying to look at what would be the general size of them, because some can be too big for the desk, but they must, like Mr. Coughlin said, they must go home each day. They are not to be left at school. So we are possibly considering looking at our PTOs, if that might be something that they may wish to research. But time at this point, we could not get them here immediately in time. So that's why we need the parents' help.
The same would be for a shield. If you elect for, that can't, as Ms. DeFilippo was saying, that can't be used in lieu of a mask. But in some cases, some may feel that this is what they want. I would strongly encourage that they take that home and properly clean it and not leave it in the school, knowing that it could get contaminated, could get damaged, and there's no really true way of knowing it's getting disinfected. So bathrooms, your question on that, they will be disinfected as far as fogging them in the off hours. During the day, we'll continuously going through, depending on staffing and on the use. But to think a bathroom's going to get disinfected on each use, I don't think it's practical. But I don't want to sound harsh in saying that. They have a great opportunity after using that bathroom as we training it, where that's the time that they should be using hygiene, washing their hands, and as they're exiting the bathroom. But we'll be monitoring, but it won't be done each time it's used. We'll be following all the guidelines, and I can assure you we'll be in excess of what the guidelines say.
Okay, moving to transportation. I know we have a couple questions about drop-off and pick-off times. Will the intermediate and elementary schools be staggered? The times at this point are still the same as they've always been. Unfortunately, it does conflict with our busing schedule. Please understand that there will be half as many students coming into the buildings each of these days. So that will hopefully help, but we also expect that more people may be driving. So we do appreciate. There was a question about, is this planned for the entire school year? Currently, yes, it is, until the governor orders us in a different direction. So Pete, could you take it away there on all the items for transportation?
Yeah, absolutely. Mine's actually pretty easy. The school bus is considered an extension of the school. So a lot of the standards and the high care, the regulations, the attention that's been given to schools is also being given the buses. So we really want to alleviate any concerns that you parents might have. As mentioned, masks will be required. So just a reminder that we don't want to give the students anything to eat or drink on the school bus. We haven't allowed that before, just for choking reasons mainly. But especially now for safety reasons, you'd have to take your mask off to consume any of those items. The next one would be cleaning. We also want to assure all you parents that just as much as the schools and the classrooms are being done, HOCES goes above and beyond when it comes to the school buses themselves. So just for instance, if a bus driver has a route in the morning where they go around, they pick up the older kids, drop them off at the school, go back out to pick up the younger kids, there will be a cleaning of the bus before each one of those groups. So there's no cross-contamination in that case. When they come back, the buses will be cleaned even more thoroughly, and then all that whole system will be done all again in the afternoon. So it is quite thorough. We're not even going to be worried about any part of the cleaning part. We just want to assure you on that. Social distancing, that was a tough one for most of the school districts in the state. How is it that we're going to do that? And we ended up, like most, realizing that the safest way to do it in our district is to put one child per seat. So the only exception to that rule is if you have more than one child that's going to be on that route that day. We can put more than one in a seat, up to 3 if they fit. but then we would social distance the kids after them or around their seats so that we still have the right distance. So there's so few kids that we are transporting in the way that we have things arranged that it really is the safest way to go. We're very proud of how it's going to be done. Routing, and that's one of the biggest questions right now is when can I get my child's information? What's the bus number and what time are they going to pick up and drop off? We have started our routing as of yesterday because of all of the lateness and the regulations that we got. We had to split up all of the groups, the cohorts into A and B, and the principals have done a tremendous job in doing that. And then we get the information from them and then we start to route. So everything has to be done by hand. There's a tremendous amount of work, but it is in our best interest and your best interest that we communicate on this. We want to get this information to you, so we will as soon as we possibly can. If you have any questions, when you get your information, call us and we're happy to walk you through that. We really want you to be aware of the circumstances and we don't want you to question anything that's going on with your child. But we're happy to be doing this. We still have some kids. Our drivers are excited about coming back and being able to still do their jobs. So please stay in contact with us. And that's all I have for transportation.
Thank you, Pete. And now moving on to nutrition, Jessica Preston.
Hi, and thank you, Dr. Douglas. So I'm here to speak a little bit about our food service program and what that's going to look like in this coming school year. As it has been shared by others, the cafeteria is also going to be enacting recommendations from the CDC as well as our health department. The on-site nutritional services are going to be providing a socially distanced dining with cafeteria pickup. We will have individually portioned food, and we're going to be working in collaboration with our building administrators to set this up. Any of the shared tongs or self-service areas will be removed, so there are not any multiple touch points. We're going to again be partnering with our transportation department to service off-site meals for those that are going to be doing any remote learning. On hybrid days, we are going to make sure we have access to all enrolled students to breakfast and lunch meals. The breakfast and lunch meals will be available in meal packs for 3 days. Students that are enrolled in our 100% distance learning will have access to a 5-day meal pack, and that will include 5 breakfasts as well as 5 lunch meals. So this is very similar to the weekly meal program we have enacted throughout the summer for the emergency meal services, which was the Wednesday pickup. We will be following up with instructions for how to sign up for these meals in the hybrid and distance learning program, so stay tuned for that. With that being said, it's also important to note that the free emergency feeding program that started in March is going to end here in August. So that means that all students will need to complete a free reduced application to access the free meals. Anyone without an approved application will be enrolled as a full paid student. The free meal application is currently available on the school district website. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns with this application, please feel free to contact me. And that's it for my portion. So thank you, and we look forward to serving you.
And thank you, Jess. It's important to note, families, if you know of anybody, this is the most confidential program and provides one of the biggest advantages for anyone that has some difficulty, especially during these tough times and even without, to make sure our students are well fed. And please just fill out the application. It is all done in private. If you need to, please get in touch with the food service or your building principals. They will take care of you. It's here. We wanted to help and make sure our kids are well prepared, well fed, and ready for their education, whether they are in school or at home. So thank you, and please reach out if you need that assistance. It's also important to make sure that, I forgot to do this in the earlier one, but we did say for safety and security reasons, the buildings are basically closed to outside visitors this year. In addition, we will not be having food brought in. I mean, there was a question on the question and answers about birthdays and cupcakes, and those are a great part of the elementary years. But at this point, because of safety and security, we cannot have stuff being brought in from outside sources, even if it's purchased, because there means there's some contact. We will try to research this more and try to come up with a solution. But at this time, please understand that unless you have business in the school, only teachers and students and the administration will be allowed in the building. That is not to keep anybody out, but it is to maintain the envelope and the safety and security of the building and the practices. So I hope you'll be understanding, and we will try to work with you as much as we can. At this time, turn this over for the educational portion, which is the bulk of it. There's a lot of questions here, whether it's in social emotional, special ed, or the educational plan. Please stay tuned with a lot, as we've got about 40 more questions to cover in the time left. Tony, please take it away.
Thank you. I'll do a broad brushstroke on this one, and then I'll ask Kelly and maybe some of the building principals to weigh in as far as those orientation sessions, because I know those were specific questions asked by parents. And I know Kelly had worked with the committee, the Social Emotional Wellbeing Committee, as part of our plan. It's important to note that we felt so strongly about the overlay of social emotional well-being in all the operational and instructional areas that we made it its own team, very similar to the work that we had started with our HOCES 2030 initiative, and it's being one of our key learning and educational opportunities, being culture and wellness. So we are well poised to continue this work and move forward to make sure that students are welcomed, our faculty, our students are welcomed back and ready to learn and get used to their surroundings. But this was work that had already been doing, we've been doing as a district when it comes to social emotional health, and now it transitions nicely into this particular model for starting off this school year. So if Kelly, if you don't mind giving a broad brushstroke of some of this, and then maybe the principals can speak to some of the orientations that they were thinking about and working with their teams with.
Sure. So as Tony had indicated, one of the committees for the reopening initiative was the Social, Emotional, and Wellbeing Committee. We had parents, community members, and a broad brushstroke of staff that were involved in that committee, with over 10 hours of work, in-person planning that went into talking about really how we approach re-entering our buildings and how we look at and help support both anxiety and stress that are occurring at this point. And we really took a three-pronged approach to that. You know, how do we support and address social, emotional, and well-being for students and for staff, and thirdly, for our families. Our staff that are 12-month employees have been in the building since mid-June. And so we had that opportunity to take a few days and really figure out what it was like to be in a space that we hadn't consistently been in with other people in over 3 months. So that took a little bit of time, a little bit of adjustment, really relearning what that meant to navigate our environment again and these new norms that we have for health and safety. And we thought about that application as it regards to what happens when staff comes back in the building. How do we best support staff so that they can have that time to reorient, feel comfortable, understand what the new normal is, and make sure that they feel safe in their environment? Because we then need them to help support students when they come into our learning environment to make sure they feel safe in that learning environment so they can do the very best they can do. You know, and the same goes for families. You know, certainly there are a multitude of supports that we have in school and community resources that we have access to that we can link families to should there be concerns. We worked heavily on taking a look at what we could do to kind of take the pulse on a more regular basis for both our students and our staff to make sure that, you know, as a week goes and 2 weeks and a month, that we're in a good place still. And if we're not, that we have those resources again to support and address the students and staff and families. We looked at that, you know, both in the short term when we re-enter, but then we'll be continuing that work, as Tony had said, in the Wellness Committee and a broader stroke across, you know, the school counselors and the K through 12 planning. We'll look at it at 3 months and 6 months, 12 months to really make sure that we're still supporting and addressing what all those needs are as things ebb and flow and come and go the course of the years, we expect there probably will be changes. So that's just a quick broad stroke of the work that that committee had done, knowing that there will be training coming both for students and staff in the upcoming weeks in regards to this area.
As far as some of the principles, like I said, some of the questions were specific about orientations. If you wouldn't mind speaking up.
Thank you, Tony. So I'll go ahead and I'll start for the elementary principles. So first and foremost, we know how important it is for all of our new students and families to be welcomed into the school. We traditionally do a lot of things for that. We traditionally do kindergarten orientations, for example, pre-K meet and greet, lots of different things that we traditionally offer. We know it's so important to help learn the culture and be welcomed into the school and learn our school communities. So we're talking about ways to still have those types of opportunities. The details aren't figured out yet, but we know the importance that is for all of our students. So be looking for more details coming from the building principals in regards to that. So we don't have the exact details or anything, whether they're going to be virtual or in person. We're still figuring those details out, but we know how important it is because we want to make that first time when your child comes into the school and they're with us for the whole day, we want them to already feel comfortable. And we want you to feel comfortable knowing that we're taking care of your loved ones. So with that said, I'll let the other building principals add on to that for what they'd like to say.
Sure. And this is Robin Dubrava. I'm the assistant principal at the intermediate school. I echo very much what Mr. Patterson just said. Mike Bostwick, our principal, and I are working very hard at trying to put together opportunities for possibly students to come into the building in socially distanced ways, in keeping with the guidelines of the Department of Health, of course. If that works out to not be possible, we are looking to put together some virtual tours. We understand the importance of our new students and our incoming fifth graders who've not had the opportunity perhaps to be in the building before. We understand the anxiety and worry they feel about that. So we value very much having giving them the opportunity to come in the building if at all possible in a socially distanced way, and keeping with the guidelines set forth by the Department of Health, of course. And if that's not possible, we are looking at setting up some virtual tours where students can at least see the layout of the building and have an idea of perhaps where their classroom is at. Just like Mr. Patterson said, we have no set dates of these possible virtual tours or if any in-person tours could be done yet. We're still working on all of that. The information will be forthcoming, of course, and we'll let you know at our earliest convenience what that might look like.
Thank you all for that. I think it's important that, as they have said, that still in those planning phases, as we are in that stage of implementation of planning the details of our process and putting the logistics down and understanding the parameters and trying to, as Patrick well said, welcome our students in, and we want them here and we want them to feel welcome. And I think we've echoed this before. We want them here every day if we could. So it's a matter of how we do it under the current parameters and make everybody feel welcome in that manner. Just as a FYI, some of the material that's on the PowerPoint was a collection of pre-K through 12 questions that came in. We put them all together so people would see what some of the things that we were talking about, hence the freshman first day there. Rest assured, all our transition years in the new buildings are thinking of different ways to do that virtual or some kind of welcome of new students to their building. So with that, we're going to switch over to some instructional questions that we got. Specifically, we'll start with the outside our building and then we'll go within in more detail to our programmatic. But outside, we do have many students that attend academic programs outside our walls. Kelly will speak to those in a moment as far as some of our special ed programs, which is the bulk of what we see in our pre-K through 6 in our elementary is that connection. The rest are more of those secondary programs, but we'll speak momentarily to those BOCES programs and what that daily that looks like for them. And I know there's a lot of conversations with our chairs in special education and with Kelly leading that charge. A question that so we'll circle back to that one momentarily. Attendance was one issue that came up on several different instances. How does that look? How do we do that? We are required to take attendance. It is part of the musts of the New York State Education Department. And we must, as you see, I quote some of the items here in the 5th and 6th bullet, I think with 2 or 3, 4th and 5th bullet, excuse me, on what that means, the regular and substantive interaction with the appropriate certified teacher, regardless of the delivery method, and the alignment of our curriculum with the state standards, of course, which we already do. And we've been doing a lot of curricular work in this district over the last couple years. And there were routine scheduled times for students to interact and get that feedback and support. So our learning management system, I'm going to have Tiffany speak in a moment about it in detail, but does have a data analytic aspect that allows us to see attendance and when a student accesses the program to do work. And we can use that as a primary way, of course, for that. Plus, when we have the regular interaction and keeping track of students and the work that they're doing at the elementary levels, that regular interaction. Now, keep in mind, we are very aware of the developmentally appropriate nature of this work. I've said this before, and we all know that, especially those that have worked in remote environments since March, that it becomes very exhausting to have these types of conversations for lengths of time. And the expectation to have a kindergartner in front of a screen for a 6-hour day is not developmentally appropriate. And I dare say it's probably not developmentally appropriate for most of us. There is this creating this learning management system and using the system for that regular interaction, as well as other communication tools to ensure that you might be working synchronously in the moment with a teacher or asynchronous, set to a task and accomplish, or to review skills or go over material or work towards a project or a paper, depending upon the grade level. Again, we are so cognizant of that developmentally appropriate nature of the work that we deliver. I want to ask Tiff if she would just talk a little bit about that learning management system that we're looking forward to moving into.
Sure.
Tony, Tiffany, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just before the learning management, it's important to emphasize the parents. The best way, if you're in the remote, is really look at the schedule and try to hit all of the instructional times, because that's your attendance. And then if by chance you do miss, because there are questions, what if occasionally we miss something, will it be recorded and can we do something in the evening? Yes, but that should be the exception rather than the rule as much as possible, so that students can do work independently, offline, like Mr. Gill was saying, but try to make sure that they keep up with the daily lessons as they will be moving forward. New York State still requires us at this time to fully go through our curriculum.
Okay, so as we transition to that learning management system, so we are in final stages of selecting a management system that can be a very easy sign-on for students. We really want this to be a smooth transition so that students across the district really have one screen and that they're not logging into multiple different platforms. So that has been a big goal of ours that we set with a criteria list of opportunity that we wanted to make sure that we could honor the work being done by our staff. But most importantly, one of those big criteria that rose to the top was making sure that it's interactive and that students can really be at ease and understand how to use that system. There will be a lot of learning and supports as we move forward in these final stages for parents. As for students, that's a critical piece of this. We want to ensure that all stakeholders have the right supports and can learn the process through that learning management system, so everybody's understanding how to use it at home. In addition, we are also looking for a parent app that can be utilized for parents so that they can track the progress of their student, know when courses or classwork is due and how they're doing with their grades, and just being in the know at all times of how your student is doing at home. But more to come. We are again in those final stages, and then as we start to share out, there will be learning provided to all stakeholders.
Thank you, Tiffany. And just to reiterate some main points, because it was a large question we had heard in the spring, and a question we've continued to hear from parents in the community, is that single point access. It's not to discount the uses of Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, Nearpod, Flipgrid, YouTube, Khan Academy. I can go on and on. There are all these tools available in our education that our teachers have been using and will continue to use but it's all embedded and created back to that single point access for a student to see their work and for a teacher to have interaction, and it syncs with our student management system school tool so that there's a crossover of information, and we can, as Tom was saying, a student who may not be able to do, although we would expect that those synchronous regular contact is happening, but on those occasions, especially with connectivity issues that we'll find as we did in the spring, it does allow a student to be working asynchronous and still show that they're attending to their work and doing their work. The next aspect, still having to rearrange this, Kelly, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna go through the, actually, why don't we hit that first? Let's do it for once the way we designed. And why don't you go ahead and talk about the students with disabilities? We have questions on that.
Okay, thank you. So as similar to the other areas of the instruction that were planned and designed, students with disabilities in part of the reopening plan had a particular piece that they felt was important that we highlight, and that we take a look at our plan to see how we were approaching students that were designated as students with high needs. When the springtime came, as has been stated prior, everyone did the best they could given the situation that we were in. But it was shared both by parents and staff that by and large, the far biggest group of strugglers were our kids that had the most significant disabilities that were engaging in the learning. So when we approached this work this time, when we were looking at what the plan of reopening looks like, we designed a tiered approach of support for those varying levels of high need for the students. So you will see, we saw the general education plan for reopening of support, and then about a week later, both a letter and an email went home to parents describing what that tiered support looks like. And now we're in the process of the CSE chairs following up and making individual phone calls to families to confirm that they really are a partner in this learning and this decision, that they understand what that tiered approach looks like, and to answer any questions that they may have, and that we know certainly and appreciate that the principals have had numerous conversations with families as well to really make sure that they have the information they need to make a decision and be a partner in this process. So at the beginning of the tier is the 504 plan, which is a general education accommodation plan. So in looking at the 2-day a week hybrid model, ensuring that whether the kids are remote or in person, that they still have access to their copy of class notes when they're taking a test, that they can have extended time so that those accommodations are still in place and happening for the students. Tiering up into students that have special education teachers attached to them, looking at how we can support the students for pre-K through 6 in particular who are in their classrooms and really trying to stay within a cohort and have small amount of movement in the building to make sure, again, that there's a high support for health and safety. So resource room support, we're looking at pushing in and consulting with the teachers and working with the students right in the classroom rather than pulling kids out from each of the various classes. Next group up, we have students that are diagnosed as on the autism spectrum that are in our ASD consultant model, who will be coming in more often. They're coming in 4 days a week, as well as our students that on their IEP have special class 15-1, also in the buildings 4 days a week. And our highest need of students that are serviced within our district programs are 12-1-1 special class students have the opportunity for 5 days a week. We also have our students that are placed within programs that are run by BOCES, and whether they be in our buildings or up on the campus, those also will be offered 5 days a week. We're working with transportation. As Pete said, it's a monumental task that we have right now for working on what that transportation looks like. And for our students that have special transportation, that's no different. They're working on that routing right now. And as that becomes available, there'll be information on that. The last piece would be the related services. So that we learned in the spring, there are some kids that actually do very well with teletherapy. So, and some that need in-person services. So in collaboration, again, with a professional judgment of the therapists and the parents, they'll be making determinations on what that looks like for each student, whether it be in-person teletherapy or some combination thereof. But more information will come on the related services as our related service providers come back from summer and have those conversations with the parents.
Thank you, Kelly.
Those are all the questions. Sure.
We had questions about resources being used, whether it be the supply lists, the classroom resources, the educational materials, the sharing of those items, or the distribution of those items. Some questions about that from the community and from parents. So first of all, supply lists are being posted and being put up as they are every school year. Our district website would have some of that information, and it's a place to check in as we move forward. I think we mentioned earlier the class list schedules are all forthcoming as we move forward. We just got done with the assignment to the hybrid. That's the next on the to-do with the communication and the normal communications we see from each of our buildings. And with that naturally comes the supply list asks. Hold on, go back one for me there, Bill. Thank you. Also know that we're very aware of when it comes to the sharing of materials, and we know that books can be shared. There's just rules to protocols to which the books have to sit before they're used again by another student. Paper packets and manipulatives and ancillary materials will still be used and be used by given to students for especially more on our primary levels as the work that they would do. We are looking at ways to expand our manipulatives, especially when it comes to our phonics and math programs at our youngest in your younger years, so that they have their own little tactiles. They're things to move forward in the supplies of the curriculum, so there's less sharing of those materials, something that we're looking into. The distribution, especially, I think the question referred to those that might be on 100% remote. As we are here in the building, that is something that we conversations to be had for parents on the 100% remote to be able to come and get those resources from the offices. And if there are issues, we always have worked them out, and our principals and staff are great with working out those ones that might have difficulty in getting resources. Know that, we'll talk about technology more in a moment, so I'll save that. So regardless, educational materials can be shared. There are rules and protocols we'll follow with health and safety guidelines, and we'll look to expand to try to keep students with their own types of manipulatives whenever possible. And when not possible, ensure that we wait the proper amount of time before being used again by another child. Grading was another question that had come up. It's the intent to maintain a normal grading system. However, we have to be very much aware of those students that might not have connectivity or issues of connectivity and unable to do certain assignments because of that. Those specific situations can be worked out with the teacher and our school staff and our administrators to ensure that a student isn't getting dinged in low grades because of their inability to connect for some particular reason, or a situation of where they live and access. But we'll talk more about that access in a moment when we get to technology. So grading is intended to move forward with the teacher and how their grading systems. And I know that our staff in all these aspects are collaborating both in-house and regionally on best practices and working in a collaborative approach to understand, as well as under the direction of our administrators and Tiffany with that professional learning of what this looks and how this looks a little bit different to ensure we are moving forward educationally every single day with our students. Assessments at the state level, we make the assumption that we do have them until we hear otherwise. There was a question about that. If New York State says we have to do the 3 through 8 testing, then we have to somehow do the 3 through 8 testing within the guidelines given to us by the Department of Health and the New York State Ed Department. So we are fortunate that we are moving towards computer-based assessments in our 3 through 8. And so that would lend itself nicely to being able to implement if that was the case in-house for the school year. So more to come. We'll wait New York State's decision on that. There's been questions about those performance-based areas. I mentioned these are across the district, cross grade levels, our physical education, music programs at the higher levels, and even actually, sorry, the FOSS are in our science labs, and family consumer science is more for the secondary level, of course. What someone might remember as home ec is now called FACS or family consumer science. regardless in the pre-K through 6 model. Those performance-based academics continue forward as they should, following the New York State curriculum. They have to look, they, of course, have to look different. There are health department requirements of 12 feet distancing for some physical activities, as well as our music program and the playing of instruments and singing. We do have to think differently about those programs and how those classes run, but they do in fact run and will move forward. And we have some very smart people and professionals in our classrooms that will work to make sure that we continue those programs as they have been. So I don't know if there's, Tiffany, was anything to add to that? I know you might have some conversations recently. I was gonna let you do that one.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, just as we really start to roll all of the details out into this plan, just know that it takes a lot of time and energies to really think about all the components that we have to address. And as a team, we have been working through these, and we're getting there and closer, and more information will more readily available, and we're going to be sharing those out. But I can assure you that our teams are really focused on identifying the essential learning and making sure that in our curriculums that we are addressing the social emotional needs as well. We are going to continue to really embed those cross-curricular content, which is not anything new that our teachers are doing, but for example, we're going to have our social studies embedded in the ELA curriculum. For any model that a student is participating in the learning model, we will make sure that there are daily live check-ins with their teachers, as well as opportunities and supports outside of the lesson. That's very true and dear to our hearts. We want to make sure that our students are getting all of their needs met through any model that they may participate in. And then we're also wanting to provide opportunities for students to engage in all subjects regardless of that model. So that's something that is at the heart of all of our planning. And we don't want to lose sight that we want to make sure that through our instructional approach that we're keeping students safe and making sure that we're meeting their social emotional needs.
So it's important to add to that, because we get a question about what does the daily typical day look like versus the remote day. It's safe to say that with those check-ins and those lesson check-ins each day, we're going through our schedule, whether you're in either model, throughout the day with that academic piece and those lessons tied in there. It won't be for the whole time, but there are key points, and key recordings that will be made that teachers will have to take care of, so that parents, if by chance, you can also follow along and provide support and assistance through watching those issues at night, in case maybe you're doing something with math that you're not familiar with, but it can also assist the student if they're having some frustrations. Please be aware that pre-K through 6, we are trying to practice as much as possible cohorting of the student classes, even in their A cohort. What that really means is if a student's in the classroom for, say, teacher A, they primarily will stay in that classroom throughout the day and not move about, and we will try to minimize movement of the students. It's not entirely possible with certain performance-based activities, but as much as we can, we will try to minimize movement throughout. So hopefully that gives you an idea of that. Typical day in school is the typical day in remote, just whether or not you get on. So we want to keep people connected. Other things, Tony, in regards to the typical day, or things to look at?
No, I was going to capture that sentiment as well, the idea of trying to maintain and limit movement, as referenced earlier in some of the health and safety, even the movement through the hallways, and signage appropriate. And really it comes down to a lot of professional learning and just training and learning for our students, our staff, the community, and the expectations of how this needs to look, so that we're in accordance with Department of Health and meeting that social emotional need, and of course the instructional program to continue and move forward under those constructs. So definitely trying to limit movement, and when done purposely. So the next piece is talking a little bit about technology, and know that this is an initiative that's been we've had for some time, with one of our buses having a hotspot, a Wi-Fi capability, and using that for the intention was for long bus runs, and to be available to students to connect their device and to use a safe internet access point. We've expanded that, and the new bus purchasing we've had to have these devices installed, these access points, and ensure that we can have a mobile unit looking into the fall where we can provide internet in a variety of different areas around the district. This includes unplugging them from the buses and plugging them into our to working with partners like the fire departments locally, as well as some of the town halls to use their spaces and other private schools around the area to piggyback off their broadband or their internet and to use as a safe place for students to get access to download materials they might need and to be able to use that. So we're increasing that capacity. It's expected, I believe, we'll have up to 10 units mobile, ready to go. Great work from Jason Johnson and the transportation department, working with Bill Giancoli to make that happen. And we're encouraged and we're hopefully that we'll have upwards of 19 such opportunities in hotspots coming into September, October. So connectivity is an ongoing initiative that we've been working on and looking to increase that. Also know that community agencies are working together to address it. Local municipalities are working to address the lack of broadband in their particular areas. It is definitely a regional push to ensure that there is connectivity. So more to come on that, again, as those tests are done and we determine how we're going to use those buses and those spots around the area. Also keep in mind, we opened up our buildings to Wi-Fi access. Some of them throw the internet a good 100 to 300 yards out, depending upon where that access point is on that building, allowing someone to be in our parking lot to safely access our internet. So that will continue, and I'm going to hand it over to Bill to talk a little bit about that, as well as the devices. And Bill, you're going to have to unmute yourself.
Thank goodness I know the tech director. So thank you, Mr. Gill, for reminding me to unmute myself there. So the devices, looking at devices right now, it's really a supply and demand issue. We were able to distribute in the spring between 800 and 900 laptops to families. We're going to be looking at a similar process, kind of going through the details right now of how that's going to look, especially now, with remote learning and probably a little bit more intensive. We have also opened up our BYOD, as Mr. Gill has pointed out. That is allowing students, if they have a device, they can actually go to the parking lots or just bring it to school during a hybrid day, and they can come in and they can connect to our Wi-Fi. What that means is that it gives them a secure network that they can work from. Okay, so we're filtering any malicious software. We're also protecting it from any malicious websites that might try to come in. So it's kind of protecting the student and they can work in a safe environment. That also includes our connectivity outwards. If we go out into the community on our buses, or even working with some municipality partners, as Mr. Gill pointed out, they will have access to the BYOD as well. So it's not like they would just be connecting to some hotspot. They'd be connecting to a hotspot that goes through our filters that are provided by GST BOCES. We're also looking into, right now the supply and demand is really the biggest hurdle that we're trying to come up with. And that's something that all districts are kind of working for. And it's really the public is dealing with, working with a lot of vendors, trying to get more supplies that are needed in a timely fashion is really the biggest hurdle that we've been facing at this point. Any questions at this juncture that have come in?
Not in relation to this, but only to note that we are looking at purchasing additional devices. In the spring, we had the luxury of everybody being remote. I say that in luxury as far as an operational resource management. We were able to deploy all our laptops out and not have to worry about having in-house availability of technology for students that were here. Now with a hybrid model and a remote on any given day, the district is looking to purchase additional equipment and technology to meet both ends of that. And I know we'll talk about finances more towards the end of this meeting. It looks promising as far as timeline to be able to get some of that in time and processing it by the beginning of the school year though. And the distribution, of course, we follow similar models. Again, health and safety it has to be taken first and foremost in the distribution of those resources. I think that's it for that particular slide. Move on to just a general other areas of inquiry. As a extracurricular activities and athletics as it applies in the pre-K through 6 model, we do have some extracurriculars that run have run in the past at these levels. We're definitely have to look very closely using the appropriate health and safety guidelines on what can and cannot move forward as far as those decisions to be made in that area. For those that are curious about athletics, that has been postponed, and again, more information to come in those areas as well. Caitlin earlier, when discussing the code of conduct, talked about the superintendent's directive. Yes, in fact, the code of conduct applies not only to what we're doing here, but that extension to that home and those calls to which a student is seen, and the expectation. One of the specific questions about dress code. Yes, that should apply. They are interacting with our teachers and other students, so we continue to have to follow the code of conduct.
Tony, if you can also add in there, we are going to be putting together some of the sort of like a written document of trying to be successful in the remote setting, such as setting up a desk and office area that is nondescript, so that when you're doing live sessions, we are not looking into bedrooms, we are not looking into the living room or at the dining room table, so that we minimize the distractions. But we will try to put together sort of like a little best actions to take, and also what not to do in regards to it, like dress codes as such.
We'll skip over the calendar. I know Tom's going to want to talk about that in a little more detail. We'll do the low-hanging fruit, these other ones really quick. Communication was a question, who to contact for what. We do have a protocol in the past of who to call in what situations. It's usually part of our regulations and the protocols and found on our district website. That still maintains itself, but in reflection, we all know that we should probably revisit that to ensure it includes some of these areas that are new to the nuances of this remote and hybrid model. But normally, obviously, that first point of contact being with your teacher, and then and when appropriate, there's administrative lens and conversations to be had. So, but we'll review that and make sure it's appropriate, and that usually goes out at the beginning of the school year as well. I don't think yearbooks save for, oh, forgive me, there was an error that I think Patty had been talking about over at Center Street that was being addressed, and there might be a redeployment of Center Street yearbooks. Is that accurate, Patty?
Yes, that's correct, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, and I think the other issue was at the middle school. We had to make sure there was a slowdown in production, and we've gotten numerous apology letters from the local rep about the middle school yearbook being delayed. As far as childcare, we continue to be engaged as not only as an employer, but as a community partner in working through childcare needs of the county. We're connecting with the Chemung Child Care Council, looking at their helping them with our information as far as just numbers of students that might be in particular models, and giving them an idea of what some of the need might be based on some of the survey questions we've asked of our families, and also as an employer, you know, sharing that information on what the hybrid model looks like, and what's the expectation or the Wi-Fi needs, and et cetera, and trying to be a community partner to supply those areas, as I was mentioning earlier, with those buses. But it goes without saying, and I think Tom said it early in an earlier conversation, that in the end, some of those, that's the relationship between the family and their provider. We're just acting as a community partner to assist and help in whatever ways we can in the childcare aspect. But that's an ongoing conversation to see what that demand is and where is the supply coming from, where it's needed.
Yes, Tony, just filling in a couple questions before I get to calendar and the next part. There were several questions in regards to, can we change plans? Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we're trying to do everything in a 4-week period. So once the plan is set, we must move forward. If something happens in the far future that is extremely, extremely rare and unusual, we would always look at it administratively, but I hope you understand in the light of the given time, it's not easy to make these changes. Specifically, one question was about if we go back to 100% in person, I can do transportation right now, but I can't do 5 days. I can do 2 days. If we go back to 100% in person, we will have to change not only our transportation plan, but we will have to also change the setups of our room. So at any time that happens, we will be recommunicating new procedures. So please just understand, as we have to shift, we will communicate it. But if all of a sudden you have a situation where you want to change from one building to another because you're moving, we certainly understand, but we do have a procedure in place and we will follow that procedure. So just reach out to your building principal and work through that. In addition, there's a couple questions about discipline. Obviously, discipline and violations of the code of conduct, refusing to wear a mask, or safety violations are going to be much more stringently adhered to without a lot of give on the district's part. We will always temper it with the age and tenor of the individual, but I hope you understand we need cooperation from the parents and support, because it's the safety and health of all, not only the students, but the staff that we have here at the district. So please be aware that there are certain things we can try to overcome, but there are certain things we cannot. In addition, if somebody could cover recess, what that may look like, I would appreciate it as I get ready for the calendar. But two other things. Tutoring. Tutoring is not something that the district does. We do just reach out to your building principals or your teachers. They will try to assist you in avenues of which could help your student, because this is going to be a challenge throughout the year as we go forward. But then on top of it, please understand that like in March through June, teachers were making themselves available almost 24/7. We have to remember, we are going to start performing our regular day throughout and recording that teachers have to have time with their families too. They will give it their times. I know many of them that no matter what I say, will still respond to you in the off hours, but please have some common courtesy that they are working just like you are during the day. They are trying to be with their family. And for many of them, they also have to educate their children because they may be in the same situation. So please understand that ours is contact them by email. Don't necessarily expect an immediate call that night, but our usual response is within 24 to 48 hours. And email, they sometimes get back to you as soon as possible because you don't like the sit, but don't be harsh if they don't get back to you right away, especially in the evening. So we appreciate that support. So if somebody can address the recess piece while I check these off, we're getting very close to being done. This is the fastest we've done it. We're at an hour and a half. Usually we've got 15 more minutes. So let's see if we can eat up the time, right, people?
I'll speak just briefly to recess. It was something that was asked before, and we covered another, and I think Mike or Caitlin had addressed it as far as the social distancing requirements out on the playground or out and about. And Mike, I think you talked about playground and those items. But regardless, yes, mask wearing when not socially distancing is the expectation, and recess time is still much needed. And I think Caitlin spoke about in those instances where it's appropriate for mask breaks as well during the day. I'm not sure what else, but they are going to be scheduled times. I don't know if any elementary principal wants to discuss any further.
I can just chime in real quick, Mr. Gill. Absolutely, recess is needed for the students. We are having them go just with their class. And as you know, our class numbers with the cohorts are no more than 12, so we can socially distance them in the room. So they will be going just with their class out for the recess time instead of going as a whole grade level, which will allow them to be more distance on the playground. The other thing is we will make sure that hand washing is done before they go out on the playground and as soon as they come back in from the playground. So that safety procedure will be put in place for the students also, but it is very much a part of the day that needs to happen for the younger students in the elementary level.
That's great information. Thanks. Patrick, did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just thanks for sharing what you did, Mrs. Bailey. And I just wanted to add, our teachers are also being very thoughtful about how do we make recess interactive. Recess is a social time for our kids. And so how are we going to play socially distanced games and activities and stuff like that? So we're brainstorming those ideas so that it's still time where you're playing, you're interacting, but maintaining social distance. So that can be a challenge. That can be trying to figure out what does that look like. But our teachers are brainstorming that. Our PE teachers are coming up with ideas of different games that could be transferred from gym class into recess. So we're trying to address that so that our kids have that, look forward to going out to recess as well, to have that social interaction.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about the calendar and the start of the school year, there is a letter going out. I know Mrs. Parazzolo may have already put it out just while we were doing this, but I want to give you a heads up in regards to the calendar because we've had to make revisions in it because we need time with our teachers and teachers need time to get settled into this new reality. We've moved all of our superintendent's conference days to the beginning. So as you look at this calendar, you can see this first week here is all conference days. There will be no students in session at this point. Now, because we've put everybody into cohort A, which is represented by the blue days. Oops, sorry, I'm trying to move the little hand here. The blue days are cohort A on cohort A. So on the 14th and the 15th, the only people that will be in school are those that are identified cohort A. Cohort B and cohort for the remote will not have any schooling on the 14th and 15th, and this is explained in the letter. On the 16th, only teachers will be dealing with 100% remote students. They will not be dealing with cohort A or cohort B. So, and then later that week, the 17th and 18th, we will only have cohort B students in, and all the other students will have the day off. So just to repeat, on the 14th and 15th, we will only have cohort A students. Everybody else has the rest of the days off. On the 16th, 100% remote will be connecting. Everybody else has the day off. And on the 17th and 18th, cohort B will be in. Everybody else will have the day off. And that's just for this week here. Now, when we get to the third week, this is when the remote and the cohorts start meeting together. So on the 21st and 22nd, cohort A will be in person. During the same time, the 100% remote kids and cohort B will be online remotely. On the 23rd, everybody, the 100% remote, the cohort A and the cohort B students will be online. Teachers will be in the school and they will be teaching from that to the everybody being remote. And then on the 24th and 25th, cohort B will be in person while 100% remote and cohort A are also online remotely. So they should be following their schedules this whole week as this is the first total connection. Now, what happens is during this first week here when they're in, it's really about connecting, social, emotional, getting to know the kids, starting to make sure they have the technologies, getting what everybody needs in their hands. And then this next week is about working and practicing that, and you'll have some light work, light homework, light processes to go through so that we really build the skills over the 3 weeks for our teachers, our students, and our 100% remote group, so that by the 28th, which is the Monday here, we are really fully engaged into our educational program. So hopefully that gives everybody an understanding of how it will start. So everybody, this will be in the letter. If you have any questions, please reach out to your building principal.
Thomas, you're muted again.
Forgot I got to hold the space bar. So I'm going to just hold while I'm looking at seeing if there's any missed questions. But at this time, all of this has to be paid for somehow. And our budget definitely did not have what we've been talking about in it. So I'll turn it over to the Assistant Superintendent for Business, Ms. Katie Bizzetti, so that she can explain some of the processes, the financials, as well as the unknowns of projected state cuts that are looming and have already started to take place. Ms. Bizzetti?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'll just give you a brief update with where we stand in our economic setting in light of COVID-19. As Dr. Douglas mentioned, we have a variety of expenses that we have to plan for and pay for this year that aren't budgeted for. I'm sorry.
Katie, we can't understand any at this time. I know you've been struggling the last couple ones, but right now you're not coming through at all.
Maybe a suggestion, you go over to Caitlin or Tom's office and just hijack their seat for a moment.
Good call.
Come on over to mine, Katie.
While we wait, Mike is going to do a little song and dance.
All right, everyone, take two. Is that better? All right. So yes, as Dr. Douglas had mentioned, this year's budget does present several challenges. We have a wide variety of items that you've heard tonight that we need to pay for that aren't budgeted for. All the PPE, all the cleaning and disinfecting items, all the technology that we need to make sure all the kiddos have what they need, as well as every other supply an item that we need to make this educational plan a success. So we have an allotment of money that we're allocated to spend thanks to the support of our voters at our budget vote this year. So our intent at this time is to repurpose the use of that money, where in a normal year we'd be spending it on one item. That one item is now on hold and we're going to spend that money on the things that we need now. The other side of our challenge comes from New York State. When Governor Cuomo passed his state budget, he built in a mechanism to help the state with its own budget crisis. And that mechanism can reduce aid to various state agencies, such as schools, by 20% throughout the course of this school year. So we have a wide variety of expenses that weren't budgeted for. Well, in the background, we have this possible aid cut looming. So we're getting through it now. We're getting what we need. So please be assured everything will be in place for your kids in the fall. But we do have to be mindful of our overall budget picture and what's coming down from the state as the year progresses.
Thank you, Ms. Bizzetti, as she runs back over to the frog pond over there is what we call it lately. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard a lot of information. The big thing is that, you know, people have asked us, well, can you put your lessons up ahead of time because I'm working with somebody else and they'd like to see the information. Please understand that the information will be there when the teachers put it up for the students as they are doing the instruction. We unfortunately do not have the time to assist others. They will have to work within the schedule of the district and the schedule of the teacher. They can utilize the information that the students gain or the parents give them. So please understand, we're not trying to be difficult. It's just that there's a lot going on and we are trying to be everything to everyone. But we also have to realize that we cannot be everything. It sort of goes in line with the finances. You know, if the district has to do what the state says and provide PPE for every student, every staff, every nurse, every day, every minute, anytime it's destroyed, the estimated cost of that is over $700,000 to $800,000 for the district. Through our survey, most of the parents and I believe most of the teachers have said they plan on bringing their own PPE. We do PPE, not physical education, but what happens is that's a tremendous help because it wasn't in the budget. That's probably going to save us somewhere around $600,000. So we hope that everybody will live up to that. But we will still have PPE available for those that are in need. So don't worry about that. But that's just an example. Just the technology alone is another $750,000. We are trying to be everything to everybody, and it will take us time. Please just be patient, be flexible, and that will help us ultimately to get to where we need to be. If you have any questions at this time, please reach out to your building principals. Reach out to your teachers once we're into the year, then to your building principals. Use the communication tree so that we can try to work together collaboratively to get the success for our students. That's all we ask. In short and in closing, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us. All of these videos will be posted online so you can go back and reference them. I don't know if you want to sit through another hour and 40 minutes, but I certainly understand that sometimes, remember, we're asking our students to do this over the course of the day, and we just did it for an hour and a half. So please understand, we will get through this. We just have to persevere, be steadfast, be daily diligent, and making sure that we get on when we can, especially for the lessons, and then do the work. And you will get through this, and our teachers will make adjustments with you. So from all of us, from my administrative team, my Board of Education, we are very proud of all the work that everybody's doing, especially our staff, and the hard work and dedication that they are going to do throughout the year for your students. Together, we will explore, as we've been doing this new process, we will empower you, the students, and our staff to work diligently to get to the point that we are excelling across the district like other districts on this COVID-19 response for education. So thank you for joining us, and we hope this has been very informative. Enjoy the evening.